Well, g'day. You're about to watch a new initiative by us called Mentored with Wes Hone. These are short, punchy, 10-minute coaching sessions. All right, I've worked out after all these years of coaching thousands of people that sometimes they just have one question. And so I just made some time available. If people can ask one little question, I'll give them like my few minutes answer, and I can help them on their journey, and I can also record it, make it available, and help you on your journey. If you've got a question that you would like to be on the show with, then just go to businessgreenhouse.com.au/mentored, MENTORD. We'd love to have you and your question on. Let's get into the first episode. All right. Well, Natanael, it's so good to have you on Mentored. What's your question?
Okay, so the challenge we're facing now, we started manufacturing double glazed aluminum windows, partnered with a company in Europe. We became the exclusive providers of this in Western Australia. And one of the big challenges we're facing at the moment is in stock. We've outgrown them. They can't supply us with the stock at the speed that we're growing. And it's not just because of logistics. Yes, logistics is a challenge because the containers take a long time. They not as organized as we are, and so now the challenge is we want to import direct. We found another partner, we signed another exclusive partnership with somebody else, and now the challenge is to raise capital to hold stock. And with this challenge comes you have to pay it in advance, and 3 to 6 months until the stock arrives here. And we've invested all our resources to launch the business. The business is booming, is going extremely well. So the biggest challenge now is raising the capital to get inventory. We don't have enough track record to go to the banks. We don't want to bring investors in because they'll be profit driven as such, to sell shares. And we want to grow the company. We want to make sure that we establish ourselves in the market. For us, is to gain market share rather than profit. So we want to keep it and grow it. I don't think it's ready to, to go anywhere else, stock market or anything like that yet.
What's the minimum you need to raise to get this thing moving?
So I need to raise between 450 and 500,000 to get 3 containers. You can't just buy one because then you're stuck with the same problem afterwards.
Yep.
So it's about 150,000 a container. So I need 3 containers, maybe a month apart or 6 weeks apart, so I can build a cycle. And then after that, we can, we're getting sales, we're getting traction. I mean, the demand is massive here in Western Australia, and we haven't even marketed properly in the sense.
Nice.
It's a good problem to have.
Well, I mean, obviously you can stagger some of your finance because you don't need to order 3 at one time, which is actually that does actually make the equation a little bit more simple. So you're telling me you can't go to banks. In terms of raising money, the kind of hierarchy that I go through is the first place I go to is friends, fools, and family, right? And the reason why you go to them first is because their interest rate is normally lower, and if you default by a month, they'll still talk to you at the family barbecue, right? So that's the first place you would go, right? And that doesn't always work. Sometimes people don't have any family that can help and so forth, right? And so that's okay too. I think myself,
with lower amounts, we can do that.
Yeah.
But, in terms of family and friends, to some of them, this is bigger than their mortgage, or even if you go to 2 or 3 of them. So, if it was up to about maybe $40,000, $50,000, I would approach people. It gets a little bit uncomfortable when we're talking this amount of money.
The next place I would always try to push this pain to is the suppliers. So I know you've got to pay them up front, but sometimes, especially if you've got an exclusive, which usually comes with minimum orders, then you can push some of the pain back to them. So my question for you is, how quickly would you turn this stock into cash? What's your stock turn time frame to turn it into money? Like, when can you pay your account?
So within 3 months of it landing here, I'd say I can turn it over. 3 months. So 6 months, 3 months to order the stock, and 6 months, another 3 months to sell it.
Cool.
So about 6 months, give or take.
So can you pass some of this pain back onto them and just go negotiate and say, hey, listen, I'm happy to place a much bigger order than I first anticipated, but I need you to give me much stronger terms?
Well, we've approached them that way, but because we haven't had a relationship yet, they said they need 12 months of trading. They
That,
can't approach the management
so
yet with that.
here's what I wonder. I wonder whether you push back on that a lot, because that's going to be their standard response, because that's how they make money. But I wonder whether the squeaky wheel can get the oil, and you go back and just say, "Hey, listen, here's our
Well,
forecast.
they don't need
Here's
us.
here's the market in West Australia. Here's the scope of what we're going to sell over a 10-year window. We need your help." And I've just seen it work sometimes, where they'll be a little bit more friendly in their terms.
Well, they're under different jurisdiction, obviously, and it's very difficult for them to claim the money from Australia, from Europe, and they don't need us. They're so big. I mean,
But
we're
but I
talking
guess
second
what I'm
second
saying
biggest
is,
extruder of aluminium in the world.
unless you've asked, I don't know that you
Yeah,
can rule it out.
we
Is
have.
what I'm saying. Like, I just keep pushing that.
We asked for 12-month terms. We even asked for 50% to go 50-50.
Yeah.
And they said, look, on first order, we can't. We need 12 months of trading before we can even consider that.
So then the next hierarchy is investors. Now, you already said you don't want to do that. So I guess every time you say you don't want to do that, you're painting yourself in a corner, right? Because you're making an impossible equation if you keep, well, we don't want to do that, and we don't want to do that, and we don't want to do that, right? So I just don't want us to keep saying, I don't want to do that, because then you're left with nowhere to go except run a small business. So
with investors, I'd love to get loans rather than sell shares.
Well, they're not going to do that, because their money's it's too risky to do that with you, right? So they're never going to be in for that. That's what your banks are for when you've got this, right? So with investors, you say that their goal is going to be to sell shares. So here's my concern with the way you pitched it to me. You've already made your mind up what every investor thinks. And that's a really bad move, because you don't know what every investor thinks.
Now, we've approached investors.
Sure, you've approached some investors, but there's nothing to say. There's nothing to say that you've approached the one that doesn't think that way, right? So there are plenty of investors out there who are not looking for short-term cash grabs and are trying to build a really big business because it might fit into their greater portfolio, right? There's a ton of those guys. Yeah. So I guess my thinking is, and first of all, so what? Like, you should give away some equity. I personally believe.
Well, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah. So then you just have to have an agreement with the investor of what that investment looks like. That we're not turning it around and fire sailing in a 5-year window. This is a cash cow business. Whatever. That's what your term sheet's for, is to decide that you're on the same page together with what you want to go find. And you may have to go and speak to 200 more investors before you find the one that goes, yeah, you know what? I want to be in that business for a 10-year window. Like, because the next kind of like level for me in where you go if you can't get investors is to do derivatives. And it gets a little bit more complex. So you're in Australia, so am I. So we have things like redeemable preference shares, where you can actually go and sell shares in your company, but you can redeem them when you decide, at a fixed ratio at the start of the agreement. So you basically pay them a premium to be able to get them out early, right? Yeah. And so they win because they get a premium return for a short-term investment, and you win because you get back control when you can afford to. So I think, and what we can't do is we can't say none of these, because then you're left with one option, and that's to cash flow this business, and it'll take you 15 years instead of 2 to achieve the same milestone. So I think you've got to come up with what you're offering the investor, and you've got to make it really a really big incentive so that they do what you want them to do instead of what they want to do. And if you can find somebody who buys whatever 10, 20% of your company, and you have a commitment that says you can buy them out in year 5, and you have a multiplier, a mathematical equation inside your agreement that says this is how I'll pay you out. Then as long as they agree to that, they're thinking, well, I either keep the business and my equity grows, or you pay me out at year 5, and this is what I get. Like, then
it's a win-win.
It's a win-win, and if it's really clear up front, I think that the clearer you can be, I think one of the reasons why investors tend to want to put their hands around more and more and more is to de-risk against a bad term sheet. If you can get really clear on what you're offering, there'll be somebody that wants to put the money up if it's a good enough deal.
I hear you.
But you can't go in with blinkers on about what might happen. You can't speak to 10 investors and make a decision, right? In startup world, the people that get funded, apart from raising 50 grand in an incubator, that happens all day, every day. You can do that off a napkin. If you want to raise actual money for an actual business, I mean, the average person probably has to go and shop 50 to 60 venture capital funds or angel investors or funding groups like that before they can start to get a feel. So I think you're going to have to go and knock some more doors and get really clear on what you're offering. And if you're not prepared to give away equity, like over the long term, then give them cash. But there's got to be one or the other.
Sure. Another avenue which we pursued was to try and see if the company in between would be happy to buy the stock, and we buy it off them. And they make their markup on the stock. That's another option. Somebody who's already doing import-export, we can hold the inventory here, in the sense they don't have to touch it. It's all...
I would rather give away equity than margin, personally.
Okay. All right.
Because equity doesn't cost you any money in the short term. It's a paper. It's a piece of paper that says you own this and I own this. If somebody else buys your stock in the meantime, you're just operating on skinnier margins, and if it's the only option on the table, it's probably not a bad one, but I wouldn't be going down that avenue. The business needs to be able to manage every single month.
Yeah, it's just a faster option because, to pursue 200 lenders or 200 investors, it'll take 2-3 months, unless I get an open door where I can pitch it. In 3 months' time, I'm losing $200,000 if I don't get this. But
I think you're going faster now to go slower in the long run if you do it that way, because you're not in control, still not in control of your own business. There's a third party making the decisions. An investor gives you capital, and you get to run and be a lot more entrepreneurial and a lot more nimble and agile if you have the money than if you've got an intermediary who drags their feet, whatever. So, I think if you go a bit slower, you'll end up going a whole lot faster.
Thanks, Wes.
Tell us, how can we find you? Give us a handle that we can find you on social.
So alosmart.com.au is the company. You can find us on LinkedIn, AluSmart, Facebook, AluSmart. Wherever you put ALU Smart from Aluminium Smart, you will find us. We're everywhere.
It's been awesome to talk to you, Natanael. Bless you, man.
Appreciate it. Bless you. Bye.
Well, hey, if you enjoyed that episode, would you do me a favor and hit the subscribe button below and hit the bell icon so that you get the alerts of all of the future episodes? It would mean the world to me if you would do that right now.